Hello guys, and welcome to session 8 of my UT3 tutorial videos. In this video I'm going to be going over how to create terrain in UT3. So here I have my blank map. It has nothing in it, and I have an additive world. Remember that when we create terrain we have to have it as an additive. So make sure that your world is set up as such. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Tools at the very top here. We're going to select New Terrain. We're going to be given this little window here, and this pretty much determines the parameters to how big our grid is going to be. So for all intents and purposes, I'm going to put 256 by 256. And then I'm going to click Next and Finish. This is going to create a terrain which is behind us here, and as you can see this is all black space. This is because there's no light to show us that our terrain is there, but if I click the unlit mode you can see that the terrain is here. But going back to lit, I need to provide a light source. So for me to do this I need to go into my generic browser, go to my actor classes, go to light, and then select my directional light. Then I'm going to right click anywhere here and click add directional light here. If I move this up, you can tell that the direction of the sun is pointing downward. In other words, our sun is coming from straight up. We can change the way the sun is rotating by switching to rotation mode and rotating the light source so that the sun can rotate in the direction we want it to. So now that we have our light source, let's fool around with our terrain. Well, right now, since our terrain is all one giant color, it's hard to see what we do or manipulate the terrain. So before I start messing around with this, I'm going to click the terrain editing mode here, and I'm going to be greeted with this window. Now over here I have my tools, my various tools in which I can paint with. These are my settings for my brush. This is my tessellation, brush size, and things I can affect. So right now I need to put a material on this terrain. So to do this, I'm going to right click in this dark gray area, and I'm going to be given this menu here. I'm going to select New Terrain Setup Layer from Material, Auto Create. I have to select the material first. So I'm going to go to my UN terrain, and I'm going to select this as my initial material. I'm going to right click here, New Terrain Setup Layer from Material, Auto Create. I'm going to be greeted with this window. This window is a package creation window. So I have to properly name this as a package. So I'm going to name this terrain test, TR test. And I'm going to create this on my first layer. And now I'm going to be given a sub-package menu in which I have to remember to select the package from this drop-down list. Here's my TR test, and I'm going to call this grass. I'm going to click OK. And over here we'll already see that immediately we have our grass terrain. So the next thing I need to do is how I'm going to influence this terrain. So with my terrain window still up, I can't close this. I'm going to use my tools here. The strength determines how hard something is lifted or pinched down. So the higher I put it, the faster this occurs. The lower I put it, the slower this occurs. The radius is how big the area I want to affect. So if I increase the radius, as you can see, Now my red rings are larger than the area I had before, and if I decrease it, it is now significantly smaller. The fall off is the outer area. It's sort of, if I increase this, how big of an area is going to be affected. If I turn this fall off, then I just have the one ring, and just that specific area will rise. So if I want to have nice smooth lifting of everything around it, I have to make sure to adjust my fall off radius so that it doesn't seem like it's like some crater thing. But I made a crater thing. Anyway, when you create the brush size and strength how you want it, to influence how you want to affect your height map, you have to have your paint tool and you have to hold the control key on your keyboard. When you hold the control, if you left click, it raises terrain, and if you hold control and right click, it lowers terrain. So one thing we like to do is, if I go into the grid mode here, right now my terrain is low polygon. So what's going to happen is that my polygons are going to be in low detail. So one thing I should do before I start actually manipulating the map is to increase the tessellation. I stress not to increase the tessellation more than twice, because then you're going to start running into performance issues. So let me do this. That's 1. That's 2. And I can decrease the tessellation. And basically by increasing the tessellation, which is what I'm doing, is I'm increasing the level of detail on which I can manipulate this terrain. So going back into my lit mode, I can now see how I'm influencing this terrain. So now I'm going to show you some more tools here. If I go to the center, right? If I increase my landmass and select the flatten tool, if I hold control, it pretty much averages where I clicked, and it creates these flat ridge type head things. If I click on the smooth tool, it smooths out the edges so that they're not so hard edge and blocky. As you can see how it's sort of like blocky and sort of stretched out, but when you smooth it, it gives more detail and believability to what you're creating here. So here I have my smooth tool, and now I have a ridge that I can't climb, but at least it doesn't look like, you know, something out of like N64 or something. This is the average tool, and the average tool makes making ramps out of terrains like this easy. So if I hold control and spread it down and just go like this, I have now made a ramp that I can go up on, that I can climb, because it's averaged it out. Now I could have adjusted the size of this brush here, but essentially you get the point. Like if you're coming in from this flat land, you can go up this ridge, and now you're on this ridge and you're not running into any problems where you can't climb or something. This is the noise tool. Just creates these jagged edges here. You know, if I could smooth these out as well. Makes nice little interesting bumps. So that's the ways you can manipulate the terrain, and I think for now this is good enough. So now I'm going to tell you how to create different types of terrain, so that you don't have the one or different kinds of materials to put on your terrain, so that you don't have the one material. So to do this, I'm going to select yet another material. I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to right click in my dark gray area here, new terrain setup layer from material. Once again, I'm going to be greeted with this package creator. I have to remember, I can't stress enough, you can't forget this part, that you have to select the package in which you created to create this stuff. So I'm going to call this layer 02, right? And I'm going to call this, once again I have to select from here, package, tr test, grass 02, right? Unreal can get a little goofy sometimes because sometimes when you draw, it doesn't always draw. Also, you have to remember that when you create a second material, you have to go back to your paintbrush so that you may paint on your new material. So once again, I'm going to hold Control and I'm going to click here, and yes, as I predicted, nothing happened. If this occurs, just close the material, the terrain editor, and reopen it again. Something like this will happen. And make sure you have this yellow stuff highlighted, and now it should work. So here I have my second terrain material being applied to my terrain. So another thing I can do is I can manipulate these materials on my terrain through my package. One way I can do that is if I go into the package where this terrain is stored, tr test, and I double click on my first terrain. Here's my terrain material. This is this material here. I can change the mapping scale of it. So if I make this, for instance, 12, as you notice right now, if you're looking at this video, you're seeing a repetitive pattern here. If I click 12 and press enter, it's going to take a little time. It increases the size of this scaling of the material on this terrain so that when I'm closer to the ground, it's not as repeating. So it's not it doesn't look like it's fake or something. Another thing I can do is I can apply grass static meshes to a material. What I can do is for my grass 2, for example, if I double click this guy, I'm going to have an option here for foliage meshes. If I click the plus sign here, I'm going to get this static mesh here. I'm going to click this little drop down window and I can assign a static mesh that can be our foliage. So I'm going to go to our UN foliage, and I'm not going to select the material. Instead, I'm going to select the static mesh. This is a good guy to select right here. I'm going to click the green arrow, and now wherever I paint this guy, grass is going to appear. But right now grass isn't appearing. Why? The reason why is because the density for this grass is set to 0. So I'm going to chalk it up to 50. And now we have grass. If I decrease the density of it to like 20, you'll start seeing a little less amount. If I make it 5, you start seeing patches of grass. Now here's another problem, is the drawing scale isn't set correctly. As you can see, grass is showing here, but grass isn't showing in the background here. This can be manipulated with the max draw radius here. So I'm going to make this 4096, and now you can see the grass almost as far as this thing stretches. So now I have my grass. Right? I can create seeds here so that it creates more variation of which direction the grass is facing. I can increase the density so that I get more empty splotches, like so. So if I wanted to create one more material just for believability, I'm going to go back to my UN terrain. I'm going to select a sand material, dirt material, whatever. Gonna open this guy, gonna right click, new terrain, setup layer. Remember to select your package. I'm gonna call this guy layer 03. Remember again your package, and I'm gonna call this dirt. And we're gonna get our third guy here. Once again, remember to select your paintbrush. And now when I paint here, It's gonna freeze up a little bit. Now I have my dirt. And I decrease the size. So I close this, move this to the side, and I have my dirt. And I can put different grass foliage on this dirt, just like I did with the last one, and so on and so forth. And that's how you go about creating terrain. So I hope this tutorial helps you, and I'll catch you next time.